Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here for the last episode of Talk of the County for the month of February, Black History Month, which is all about American history. Therefore, I'm excited to note that I have Mr. Gregory Edmonds here, president of the Tuskegee Airmen Ohio Memorial chapter. How are you doing, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
This guy is a wealth of knowledge. You would think that this guy was in one of the Red Tails to the extent that he knows his history on the Honorable Tuskegee Airmen. Tell us a little bit about what quenched your thirst for the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and everything they meant to aviation and military service.
Well, when I had first heard about them, I was taking a Black Studies program in college at Seton Hall University in New Jersey, where I grew up. And but prior to that in high school, I was never exposed to African American history in that light. It was always with the Civil War and slavery. It's about pretty much all I heard. So imagine going to college and all of a sudden you're getting into a studies program that says, oh no, we participate in a lot more different areas and positive roles. And so the Tuskegee Airmen was part of that mention in terms of study. So I didn't get too in depth with them as I did for other subjects like the Black Cowboys and the Buffalo Soldiers, but we moved to Toledo, and I found out about their National Museum in Detroit, being only an hour away. Then I decided to take a group of Boy Scouts up there in 1995 to their what was then their National Museum. And that was founded by Mayor Coleman Young, who was then mayor of Detroit, first African-American mayor of Detroit, who was also a Tuskegee Airman. He was a bomber pilot. So when I brought the boys there, they jumped all over me and said, hey, we need young fellas like you to help us with our legacy in terms of spreading the knowledge. Now, when they formed chapters in 1971 in Detroit, it was only, the membership was restricted to documented original Tuskegee Airmen. So they just had the national chapter, and then areas had their local chapters. But you had to be an original in order to be a member. Then, as their numbers shrunk over the years because of age and other things, they decided to open it up to active military personnel and civilians, like myself. So that's when I was able to join in 1995 when they asked me to.
Well, do you know what led the late Coleman Young to politics, to be in the first mayor of the city of Detroit? This time it was a grand city at that time.
Yeah,
I mean, it was, the big three automakers, large population. It's been through some tougher times since then. But he was there at just the height of Detroit's pride. I just remember as a kid growing up in Michigan on the other side of the state, everybody knew who Coleman Young was. He was just this larger than life figure, but I never knew that he was a Tuskegee Airman and a bomber pilot. That's just amazing. When you, for someone growing up in Michigan, the late Coleman Young was like Ohioans talk about the Honorable Carl Stokes, who was the first black mayor of the city of Cleveland. I mean, as a kid growing up, I heard all of those names. Never thought I would be anywhere near politics, actually. But it's just funny how I wonder what led him. Did you have any background on what led him into politics?
Civil service. Remembering all that he came through, and I recited that story about Freeman Airfield in Indiana, where they were stationed before they got to their last air base at Lockbourne, now Rickenbacker, and they had the Freeman Field incident where the Tuskegee Airmen, they were all first or second lieutenants outside of being a captain, and of course Colonel Davis. They wanted to go into an officers' club, and they were refused admittance at Freeman Airfield. And several of them, including Coleman Young, pushed past and said, "We're going to go in there. We're going to have our drink." And they did, and they were slapped about it in terms of saying, "Well, you were insubordinate, and then we're going to court-martial you." And they were, and it was put on their record. And then after that happened, then they were transferred to Lockbourne, Rickenbacker, because they said, "We got to do something with these guys. We don't want to keep them here." So then that's when they came to Ohio as their last base. And then when they got here, and of course they came with Colonel Davis, and Colonel Davis, still was their commander here. Okay,
which makes a lot of sense that they should have been in Ohio in the first place. North Carolinians would debate me on this, but Ohio first in flight, right? Patton Air Force Base and all that came later. So
don't forget Michigan was Selfridge Air Base. We got Tuskegee Airmen stationed there. And the fact that you had the Detroit chapter, which was the largest chapter at that time. And that's where I got, when Coleman Young said, when he was mayor, he said, we need to house our stuff in a place where people can come see it. And not just everybody got it packed in a trunk here and there. So then that's when he got one of the buildings in the old Fort Wayne section of Detroit. And it was a brick building, 2 stories, and he turned it into their own museum. And that's when they started housing and collecting from all over the place. So it was housed there. And when I joined the Detroit chapter, they had their own speakers bureau, where the fellows would, if in terms of getting asked to come out and speak here and there, they had a formal way of being asked and then going out, no matter what, it be schools or whatever. So when I joined, then I became here, a docent, where people would visit. I'd drive up an hour from Toledo and take them around, as well as being a member of the chapter. So that's how I got my knowledge, a lot of knowledge during those years.
And I wish I could ask you more about Black Cowboys, because you say you know even more about Black Cowboys than Buffalo Soldiers.
But then, like I said, Michigan has got a rich history. You've got not only the Detroit chapter, the original chapter, but now you have the Macon chapter, which was named after Richard Macon, who was one of my mentors as well with the original Detroit chapter. So they're over around Livonia. Okay. Yep. So you have 2 chapters up there now.
2 chapters.
Yep.
So that leads me to my next question. Talk about the mission of the Ohio Memorial chapter and what you and your organization does to keep this legacy alive.
Well, it started even right back then when I first joined the chapter, and that they said that, because originally when they formed those chapters in 1971, it was about people asking, "Hey, we want to hear you guys," and all that, and they were all original. So they would go out and tell the story about what they went through. But then as the years went on, they started to realize that, we're not getting any younger, so we have to pass on our legacy. And our legacy is going to be passed on through having youth programs. And then this is why that started to mushroom. And in conjunction with what it was then called the Organization of Black Airline Pilots, now it's called the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, they partnered with them to foster youth camps, for boys and girls who were interested in an aviation career. So that they want to say, this is how we learn coming up, and this is how we want that to continue in terms of the legacy. So the Ohio Memorial chapter has our Buckeye Tigers program there, where we take youth ages 12 to 18 every second week in July. And this will be our 17th year, to expose them to various places like NetJets. We have a partnership with the Columbus Police Helicopter Division. We take them to John Glenn Airport and meet with their personnel, and they talk different jobs connected with the airport. We take them to Wright-Patt Air Force Base and Museum, and they talk about careers. They can't wait to get them out there in these places, especially with the military bases, because they say, oh, yeah. If you're 16, 17, 18, we will pay for your college and that, okay, and all that. So, because it's not all about being pilots. because there's so many different careers in aerospace. So and like I said, with the Tuskegee Airmen, like I said, we got the mechanics. As I said, a mechanic has said, if you see a plane in the air, mechanic put it there. Imagine where it would be without that type of skill. You have we even have the flight attendants come up and speak because that's all part of this. A pilot just doesn't come in, get in the cockpit, and off he goes.
No,
there's many parts and segments. So when we have our youth come in, we expose them to this, the engineers and the cybersecurity people, and all. It's many careers that you don't hear talked about commonly. Okay, so that continues their legacy in our eyes.
You don't think about those mechanics until you sit on a tarmac longer than you anticipated, and they make an announcement over the PA system that something needs to be tightened up or loose or something needs to be adjusted in some kind of way.
Exactly.
Then all of a sudden you think, okay, what that mechanic and what those mechanics are doing.
That's right.
Yeah, people trying to look out the side of the window to see what's going on.
That's right.
I mean, I know I'm a big fan of the Buckeye Tigers, and I went and spoke with them, and happened to meet. I was an individual there from Boeing, individual from Delta, and I think it was an individual from the Air Force. So they had, these kids had all that. This could be you right in front of their face.
Exactly.
People that look like them talking about aviation as a career.
Exactly.
It's just, I mean, I can't say enough great things. You take donations for Buckeye Tigers. You got a number or something. We give them the number.
We do for anyone outside. I know we appreciate the support of the Franklin County Commissioner's Office over the last few years, and we otherwise for individuals or something, we get that.
We enthusiastically support Buckeye Tigers.
Yeah.
But there are so many people out there that because it's not something that you see every day everywhere.
No, you don't. No,
you don't see these type of programs.
No, that's why we make it a point to get the word out, to involve as many kids. And it's not like the children, the youth come through and they say, okay, bye, see ya. Several of them come back. They like it so much that they do come back to do it again, to get some other learning aspects of it. This last class, we had 2 of them that we paid as youth volunteers. Okay, so that we had 30 kids in our last one, and we split them into teams of 10 where they named their own team, and then they're sort of like graded during the week for doing what they're supposed to do when they're asked to do something, and they get points. And then when we go to Don Scott Airport for them to co-pilot a plane, that's when they have their graduation ceremony with their parents and relatives. And then we award the person who's accumulated the most number of coins or points, and that person is named the ace of the week, and the runner-up is named the wingman. And for the last 2 years, they've been female. Okay, imagine that, right? So, like I said, in the tradition of Bessie Coleman, they're just taking over right away, right? So,
let's talk about the great women of color that have been involved in aviation, in its history, and served significant roles.
All right, so Bessie Coleman.
Just a few. I know
just
Bessie
a couple.
Coleman,
Bessie Coleman having to go to France to get her pilot's license because she was refused to get it here. She came out of Texas. She was the first African American and Native American woman to get her pilot's license, but again, had to go to France because she was told no. But the thing, again, that we impart upon our youth, you don't take no for an answer. She could have just said, oh, well, but no. She said, no, I will fly. And I'm going to seek any means to do that. And that's when she went overseas, as well as the first African-American male, which was Eugene Bullard. Coming back to the females, then Willa Brown, starting her aviation school in Chicago with Cornelius Coffey to train many of the men who would later become Tuskegee Airmen. So it was a woman that started that. And Bessie also had her own school, okay? So then out of that, you have many other women pilots, like I pointed out in my presentation, Madeline Swagel being the first Navy pilot. And there are just so many other examples of women. Now, again, the percentage of commercial airline pilots being women is less than 2%.
Yes.
The first African American women. And African American in general is 3%. Okay, but and this is 2025. 2025. How many years after World War II? 80 years. At the end of and this is what we're still faced with here. So again, we still have much hill climbing to do, but we're going to do what we can. We're going to do what we can.
I think there are significant obstacles out there, and I think that's really what just blows my mind thinking about the accomplishments of the Tuskegee Airmen. One, they had to be exceptional to even be considered to be in a segregated unit and to be the subject of racism and to be thought of as not being as good as. But you couldn't even get in unless you had a entry-level amount of college education. You had to have the highest test scores.
Right.
Just to be considered at that day and time.
Right.
And then yet when they got in, they had to have a sense of gratitude to just, I'm here. This is my opportunity to fly.
Right.
Despite the systematic racism they were facing, discrimination they were facing, they would never be treated like their counterparts that are doing the same thing, even probably less decorated in a lot of cases.
Right.
Could never dream of supervising anybody else except amongst themselves.
Right.
Talk a little bit about what you learned about just how systemic that was inside of the Air Force at that time, pre-integration.
Well, it was then called the Army Air Corps, and they were, again, confined to that Tuskegee Army, Tuskegee Moton Airfield down there in Tuskegee, Alabama. They were not even allowed to fly over Tuskegee, Alabama, because the townspeople said, we don't want to have to look up at you. Think about that. Now, here they are being trained to fight the Germans overseas. Now, they didn't go to the Pacific Theater. They only went to the European theater. But they were trained to fight but yet we don't want to be associated with you in any way, shape, or form, even as much as have to look at your planes flying over our town. So yeah, imagine that. But I always say, throughout history, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, right up to present day, with people of color, it's always been love of country. That has always been the common thread, is love of country. That's why we always say it's not just black history, it's American history. Because you take away that participation, where would we be as a country today? And a lot of people and ethnic groups contributed to that. But again, they, even like you said, in the face of not being able to go into town and to go in those bars, and like the Buffalo Soldiers couldn't go into town in saloons, and they would be in fights and all that, but they wouldn't back off either. So, but they still wanted to serve. They still wanted to serve, even though you come home. Some of them had to take their uniforms off if they went down south, after World War II, because they could possibly get lynched. And yet here they are, having fought for this country to continue this freedom. You say, wow, how could you? But again, they said, this is our land. It's not his land, it's our land, and this is why we lay down our lives to defend our freedom, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. And hopefully we'll still get more breaks.
How much patriotic can you be to get in a plane and drop bombs and risk being shot down? And pay the ultimate price. You can't show no greater amount of patriotism than that. And one of the quotes out of the video during our presentation earlier today, that quote at the end was priceless, where one Tuskegee Airman was saying that his friend told him that America is not perfect, but I'm going to hold her hand until she get well.
Exactly.
America is not perfect.
Yeah.
I am going to hold her hand until she get well.
Yeah.
I put that one down. I'm going to keep that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big quotes person, and I'm gonna go back to that one. That one there is
It's powerful.
on point. It's powerful.
It's powerful because they didn't have to do it. They could have just said, you don't like me. Why should I fight for you? Right?
In the toughest of times, African Americans have always held on and believed in America's promise.
Exactly.
Even there wasn't no evidence that it was gonna ever come to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They still say we still believe and we're still going to fight, and because this is still our land. This is where we are.
Still seeking a perfect union.
Yeah.
With 2% of
2%.
all pilots.
Of all the pilots, yes, only 2% are African American.
You still holding on.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, we've been touching on this, but I want to elaborate on it some more because we can't enough. Why is it important to keep having these conversations so that future generations are inspired by this?
Well, because obviously every generation is different. But again, I always bring it back to our youth and what they have to look at in terms of motivation and saying that I don't want to quit. I should keep going even if someone puts a roadblock in your way. You know how to go around or fly over, like the Tuskegee Airmen did, fly over that roadblock that says you can't do it. And that's why I have the expression rise above. Rise above. And don't let anyone tell you cannot do something. If it's positive that you want to do, if you can't go down this path, then we got other paths we can take to get there, because certainly through history that's been proven to be true. That they didn't just say, no, all right, I'm going to go get into a fetal position and that's the end of it. They kept on going. They kept on finding another way. So
yeah, you gotta have courage to fight.
Exactly.
And that adversity that one faces.
Exactly. And to not be able to get be hired as a commercial pilot for almost 20 years after the end of World War II, even though you fought the Germans and you flew those planes, you couldn't get a job as a commercial airline pilot until 1964. So think about that, all right? So the war ends in 45, but it took almost 20 years for them to get a job as a commercial pilot. Now you want to sweep floors and all that and clean out the planes, yeah. But if you're a pilot and you wanted to be a pilot commercial, no. The answer was no.
You were only a handful of years away from the Civil Rights Act.
Exactly.
Put it into context.
And the gentleman, David Harris, was from Columbus, who was hired as the first commercial airline pilot.
That was with United Airlines?
American. It was American Airlines, yep. And he's from Columbus. He passed away, been a year or 2 years ago.
American Airlines.
And he was not a Tuskegee Airman.
He went through a commercial university type aviation.
But he had to go through the pilot. You have to come with your credentials, or they don't want to know you. So, but he did, and I guess as part of that civil rights movement, then they started to hiring more persons of color here and there. And he said, David Harris said that what he liked to do, because there have been instances of an all-black flight crew, commercial airlines, with the flight attendants and the pilots. And at times, David Harris said he would like to take his crew and purposely come through an airport in Dallas, Texas somewhere, just to see people's heads turn and eyeballs pop open and not in disbelief, like, who, what? Who? They must be from another country or something. But he wanted to make a point. We're here and this is it. Right. You'll be flying on my plane.
Right.
Okay, so.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's aviation, medicine. There's many fields where there's people have fear of diversity. With the talk about the pilots aging out, and pilots being asked to work beyond the retirement age, you would think that workforce shortage would have created calls for inclusion and greater recruitment efforts. but that hasn't been the case. Although there's been, you know, it's been talked about as if things are different than what they really are as far as opportunity is concerned.
That's why the Organization of Black Airline Pilots was formed, to try to get a focus group that can put out some programs to help boys and girls to do that. And it's just grown from there. So where there are the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals today. So, but it's still, they have limited resources. It's not unlimited. They have limited resources, but they do work with the youth programs of the Tuskegee Airmen in order to help fund and pay for transportation costs. And some they get the T-shirts and all that. So.
Yeah. Outside of the Museum on African American History in Washington, D.C., is there a separate monument that pays tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen?
You have out at the Air Force Academy. There's a monument there. There's some in Carolina. We have the highway portion of I-75.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Tuskegee Airmen.
I'm just thinking of Washington, D.C. There's so many monuments in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not familiar with any others around there. Not to say there isn't, but I'm not familiar in the D.C. area per se. Outside of the which is nice. I saw that back in November again. I had my mother with me, and she was 99, and she really enjoyed that. They do a nice job.
Yes, they do. They do a nice job.
Down in D.C., no. But here, you have National Veterans Memorial Museum. You also have the National Museum of Afro-American History in Xenia.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
They have a nice exhibit on Double Victory, if you haven't been out there. So, and of course, like I said, in Detroit, you have the we're in a wing of the Charles Wright Museum of African American History. They have, that's where Coleman Young's place moved.
Yeah. So much is on social media, the different social media channels. Does your organization have a presence there?
Yeah, we have Facebook page. Yeah, we have a Facebook page, and I got to get our Instagram page up and working. But we have a website as well, and Tuskegee Airmen OMC.com, and we have BuckeyeTigers.com for those looking at our youth program. So that's going on. Again, like I said, this is our 17th year with the Buckeye Tigers. 17 years.
That's amazing. 17 years. Yeah. You've touched a lot of students' lives in
Yes,
17
we have.
years.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. It's good to see them. Some of them go on to become pilots or have other careers in the aerospace industry.
Do they get to do these flight simulators?
Yes. Yes, because we have one of our instructors. He has a private pilot's license, and he works for a flight simulator company. So we go over that way too and bring the kids, and they really enjoy that. They can't. As a matter of fact, when we brought our Tuskegee Airman Thomas Newton here back in 2023, Rickenbacker has a flight simulator, and we took him in there, and he loved it. Now he's 95, and he's sitting in there, and his eyes as big as saucers.
It is just amazing that as I keep learning, people that live 98, 99, 100 just happen to be affiliated with the Tuskegee Airmen. That's amazing how, and life expectancies tended to be shorter in, like World War II veterans that aren't as many around anymore. But
no,
if there's going to be some around, there's chances are there'll be a Tuskegee Airmen. They all live complete
but
lives.
it's just a handful, but and maybe a couple of pilots, but I call them the super agers. They really they took care of themselves, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing to see how long they have lived.
Do you know of any of the Tuskegee Airmen that were members of the Divine Nine and active in black fraternities?
Not on the top of my head, no. I'm sure there were some, but I don't know off the top of my head.
What would you, if you had to sum up the Tuskegee Airmen in 3 words or less, what has stuck with you the most in your time studying?
Rise above. Those are my favorite words. Rise above, and that just covers it. And that, even though you're getting hit with a lot of dirt down here, I'm going to go upstairs and get over and above you and fly over that stuff, that drama, and do what I'm supposed to do.
In that vein, overcoming adversity, overcoming obstacles, was a big part of their survival, and they thrived. Though it wasn't like they didn't any of them survive. They all were thriving individuals, and at their largest peak, was it 100 pilots at one time?
No, well, 992 pilots were trained. Only a third of them saw action overseas. Okay, you still had many more that were trained as support personnel. Okay, and including the Supply Sergeant Thomas Newton that we brought back here in 2023. And then you had the engineers, and also I don't want to forget to mention the Tuskegee Army nurses who also served with them, who were first and second lieutenants. So the pilot cadets had to salute them. Imagine that. So they were also part of what they call it overall, that covers the engineers, the mechanics. They call it the Tuskegee experience. Okay, so you were part of the Tuskegee experience. If you were part of the Tuskegee experience, then you were considered a Tuskegee Airman.
And because they were segregated, they didn't receive any centralized services, of course. So they had cooks, I imagine, they had everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they were those bases when they were segregated, like Rickenbacker Lockbourne at the time. They had their own cooks, and of course you had the nurses, you had everything else out there. So, yep, they sure did.
And I think where did most stay here in Columbus after their time was up, or does history show they went all over the country?
They after the base Rickenbacker Lockbourne integrated in 1949, and so the Tuskegee Airmen, having separate units, was merged, disbanded, however you want to call it. Many of them, when they were finished at their tour of duty, they settled in East Columbus area, where the driving park area. That's why, and you have the Eddie Rickenbacker's house out there on Livingston Avenue in driving park, and we partner with them too, Rickenbacker Woods Foundation. They also you have we have our meetings out there at the Driving Park Community Center. Occasionally, we put on a drone class out the Driving Park Community Center. Others settled in the Berwick area, Hanford Village area. So they have a rich legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen in that area. So yeah,
and there's many of them have legacies that, even though the numbers of black pilots are small, they have a history of their kids following in their footsteps.
That's correct. Because again, that's still
kids.
That's right. Because members of our chapters, you don't have to be saying, "Oh, you got to be a pilot." No, because we have mechanics and engineers and all kinds of people. As part of the Tuskegee experience. Although after a while, you weren't required, like me, to be as an original. But we had a lot of people from different branches too of the service. Not just Air Force, that joined these chapters. So again, they form chapters in order to continue their legacy, and their legacy is through youth. The youth are youth now.
I'm gonna venture away from what we've been talking about. It's clear you love history, but you gotta have some kind of hobbies or something when you're not.
Oh, sure.
Studying here. What does Mr. Edmonds like to do for relaxation?
Well, I like to play tennis and golf. I always tell the kids to learn golf because that's the corporate game. And we taught our sons to play, and our grandson. We said, you may not want to know how to play it, but you may not want to play it, but you're going to know how to play it, because it gets you in a lot of circles, which it has for me over the years, many, many circles. And with the Boy Scouts, we have the golf merit badge, so we get them into that. So I do that, and again, like I say, I play tennis, and then board games and all that stuff. But I like to, and I also fencing. I also do fencing. I always grew up fascinated with Zorro and everybody else, so I got into that.
So you say you're a tennis player. Have you played pickleball?
Of course. If I play pickleball,
pickleball. For nothing.
I don't know. It took me a while to get dragged into that. You know, tennis players, you're saying, that's junior.
Dumb down.
Junior ping pong. You know, they don't deal with that stuff. But I have the equipment and all that. I don't play it as much as I used to play tennis, and I've scaled back playing tennis. I play more golf now than I do tennis. So, but I like the bike ride. I love bike riding, and so I'll be glad when this weather warms up enough for me to get back outside.
You got a favorite golf course you play?
Not especially, because I'm in a golf groups. You know, we travel, we play different courses. So I don't. I mean, I like beautiful ones like out there, Denison or Deer Ridge, those kind of places. But yeah, I even in business, I used to take clients golfing and all that. Yeah. So and always played a 2-man scramble, not let them play their own ball and get mad. You gotta have a happy client at the end of the round.
Like travel?
Yeah, I don't travel much, but I mean I do. Like so my wife's over in Cape Town, South Africa. She'll be coming back Thursday. She's having a ball and enjoying it. Always wanted to get there. I've been places like England and St. Kitts and whatnot, but I don't travel because my mom, being her advanced age, I can't just take off and run around.
When you travel, if you had a choice between the beach or the mountains, which one would you go? Which way do you go?
It'd definitely be the beach. Oh, it'd be the beach. It's not even close. I do appreciate the mountains, having been out to Colorado and seeing their beautiful mountains. I do, and then, of course, with my Boy Scout stuff, we could be hiking or whatever, and then, but the beach is where you can just put that chair out there and listen to the waves and all that, and I do that as my Alexa, play ocean sounds. I'll do that at home,
bring the ocean to you.
Yeah,
be Alexa.
Yeah, I'd love to say that.
What do you think? What do you think AI is going to be able to do for the future of aviation?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's coming. It's here. It's trying to take over my screen. I mean, it's just like let AI do it, and I'll tell you, it has its benefits. For instance, if we got short a secretary. And we have we have hybrid Zoom meetings, and I'll put the AI companion, turn it on, and it'll summarize the meetings and do the notes. And I said, do I really need a secretary right now? I don't have to worry about it. It takes that pressure off. So, but as far as to answer your question about aviation, I don't know. Pilots can answer that better than I can, but I think. I don't know if I'd ever get in a plane without a pilot, like a car without a driver. I don't know. I think that's really, but in terms of, I think it's going to be more prevalent with drones, and that's why we teach drones. I don't do it myself, but we have people who do have that. I think that's where you're going to see less of your piloted aircraft, and now you're using these drones, and that's the AI going on right now. And that's why these kids who want careers, because it's used in private industry and not just the military, should take a look at that as an option.
Yes, it's tech. You will always see more and more technology built into planes.
Yeah.
To make them safer, make them more efficient. When you think about the amount of jet fuel that is used to especially to fly these big wide body jets internationally. They're using a lot of fluid, and if there's ways to put in batteries to take some of that pressure off, I can see there being innovations and improvements in that arena.
Yeah.
Well, I've been asking you questions. What else do you have to add for Talk of the County viewers before we wrap up this episode?
Well, I was just talking to Captain Mitchell, John Mitchell, our immediate past president, and he retired from American Airlines as a pilot. And we were talking about all these years. Like, again, I've been a member of a Tuskegee Airmen chapter, first Detroit and then Ohio Memorial. I joined Ohio Memorial in 2003. We moved here in 2002. And I always kept up my membership in the Detroit chapter until we moved here. And we were talking about how we keep things going with the Tuskegee Airmen in terms of their legacy as the originals slowly move into the afterlife. And how do we stay relevant in this day and age? And John and I were talking, and we were just saying that, what keeps us relevant, again, is our youth. Again, it always comes back to the youth. I mean, we keep them engaged and wanting to go and have careers in aerospace, then that keeps the Tuskegee Airmen alive. And I think that's the attraction. Because, I mean, how many people the fact that I'm here now and being exposed to fine people like you folks, and being able to get up and speak in front of so many different people and groups is because of their legacy. It's not because if it was all Buffalo Soldiers, no. If it was all Black Cowboys, no. But it's the Tuskegee Airmen. They still want to hear them. Their legacy is so strong that people still know, oh, yeah, the Red Tails. Especially, and movies like George Lucas's The Red Tails and then the Tuskegee Airmen before that with Lawrence Fishburne, that helps, too, to have the media, out there about them. And you still have their legacy in terms of their relatives, their sons and their daughters and grands that we meet, and keeping that alive and not just show pictures on a camera phone, a camera. You put it into flesh, and that's what these kids, because they definitely, with our Buckeye Tigers camp, every Thursday we're out there at Rickenbacker, Lockbourne, meeting in our dining room facility with the kids and giving them that history of the base and the Tuskegee Airmen. So it's not like we just have the week and we don't mention anything about them. We just say, yeah, you should thank Tuskegee. No, we give them the history.
It's about the hands-on. Yeah, being as hands-on.
Exactly.
Being hands-on as possible.
And teaching them that they said they rose above their challenges.
So
they embraced it.
You heard it, folks. Mr. Edmonds is about rising above, facing challenges, and that's a part of the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. I hope that many individuals will get the opportunity to listen to this podcast. Please encourage your friends, family, relatives to take in this piece of history if they have not truly been exposed to the life and legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. And as I always close on Talk of the County, do you, because nobody else has time to. Thank you.